Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Mindful Consultant channel. In today's video, we're going to be going over a really good topic, which is accepting client rudeness a requirement of a consultant? And to demonstrate that, we're going to be going over a couple of stories that people have shared on Reddit. So, without any further ado, let's get in and let's listen to these stories. I'm a solo consultant working on a large system implementation. I have 15 plus years of experience, and I have done both bigger and smaller implementations. The challenges on this project are multifaceted. Some team members don't trust other team members. Some team members need everything to be explained their way or they oppose it. They focus on problems instead of solutions. They want everything to be exactly the same, but much, much better, and won't grasp that much, much better means that things can't stay exactly the same. Many of them don't like consultants, and so they are dismissive or non responsive. They don't like the system that they selected after a thorough process. They show their distaste through rudeness during meetings and conversations, blaming each other for oversight, gaps in knowledge. I've given feedback to leadership. I've suggested best practices that they've ignored and then brought up later as something that should have been done. Project and organization leadership isn't doing much of anything to try and fix these solutions. After more than a year of this, I'm exhausted. I know that they're paying me and it's a full-time role, which a lot of people don't have right now. But am I just supposed to smile and take that misery because I'm a consultant? Leaving the project feels like I'm failing. Staying feels like I'm going to hate my job for another 6 to 8 months. In another details, they don't have any other team members who have been through an implementation this big. I'm their only resource with this knowledge. Yeah, this is very interesting. What OP just described is something that is typically an occurrence in consulting. On one hand, you could understand what OP's saying in terms of that he wants to enjoy consulting, he doesn't want to quit. But on the other hand, there are these experiences you go through with rude clients that just makes the whole expectation of coming to work just miserable for one person. But I will say that this is due to a couple of reasons. And prior to being a consultant, I used to work in the industry, and I did have to work with consultants. And I would say that a lot of the times that the individuals on the client side that consultants work with are not the people who've made the decision to hire consultants in the first place. What often happens, and I observed this internally as well, aside from consultants, when I had to work with other departments on a project, this would be the case as well. On one hand, you have clients who don't like change. They have these quote unquote, in their eyes, strangers coming into their work environment, asking them questions about um, documentation and information that is part of the SLA, that is part of the agreement, the contractual agreement that caused the consultants to be on site in the first place, that every person who's working with the consultant should be privy to. It's still a matter of you're still coming into an environment where you're a consultant and you're not going to be there for long term. Therefore, whatever questions you're asking or whatever other work you're stopping a full-time employee from doing is kind of seemed as a nuisance. Like, you're going to be gone and we have to deal with whatever you put in place, not considering that whatever a consultant is putting in place is for the benefit of the work. On the other hand, the people who are assigned to work with consultants, and I find this very interesting and why it's not talked about more, they're like low level VPs, or they're low level individuals who, I'm going to be really honest, may not be top performers, and they get notified that consultants are coming and you're going to have to work with them. And this happened with me. Before becoming a consultant, I worked on control assignments with a bunch of consultants, and I was just told I'm working with them, I have to give them direction, I have to make sure I check their work, and that was it. Unfortunately for my case, I did not have good consultants. I had to constantly feel like I had to give them direction, and I wasn't getting responses on time either. But on the other hand, I did observe that majority of the people who had significant problem with consultants were individuals who honestly didn't want to work with them in the first place, were told to, and they didn't like change. And that happens. But does this mean that as a consultant on the project, you have to deal with this? You can't say anything, or there shouldn't be an obligation on the client and on your manager side to make sure culturally, socially, things can be smooth so that the work can be the only thing focused on and that the work can be the only thing that gets progressed. But let's look at the next story, and I would love to hear your comments below. But let's move on to story number 2. I was put onto a dumpster fire project where the internal project manager didn't care and would change his mind every time the wind shifted. He was giving the external supplier free rein to define the processes and system configuration. And the supplier was, of course, milking this for every penny they could. Instead of coming to workshops with the approach which I recommended, of these are the industry best practices, that's how the system will be configured, is there any valid reason that we need to change this, they came to every workshop with a blank page and asked, how does your department want to use the system? This of course led to every department wanting a different workflow. When I spoke up in a meeting saying this was going to lead to the new solution being even less maintainable than the old system, which was a dumpster fire that had been burning for 10 years, I was told to stay in my lane and not make waves. Fortunately, at that time, I was being actively recruited for my current position in industry management, so I just threw in the towel and let them continue down the road to ruin. If you're stuck on a project with a bunch of internal resistance, the only real option is to try to limit their influence. When decisions are needed, pre-wire these by holding one-on-one meetings with the supporting stakeholders who are probably also tired of the bullshit that their colleagues are producing. Try to come into meetings with the majority of the stakeholders in agreement and use the power of that group to shut down the naysayers. OP gave some really good advice about how to maneuver around these type of stakeholders and clients. But it's kind of sad that in this story, again, you're hearing a client who is miserable, not because of the work, but because of the clients. And the consultant is so frustrated that now this consultant is probably going to leave consulting altogether. And you could see in the story itself. And the advice that the OP gave, although it's really good, and I would honestly say it is the best way to divide the clients that actually are supporting you, that actually want this project to be done and over with, versus the clients that will give you a lot of deflection and cause the project to go slower. But again, it's the same thing. Why is it always on the consultant side to give that excellent customer service care when contractually it is agreed upon that this is a project, this is a service that is needed from the client side? I agree that as a consultant, you should really put your best foot forward, really strategically think and understand on how to divide and conquer good stakeholders from bad if you so encounter that in your project. But on the other hand, at some point, the higher level ops, even the stakeholders should know, what can we do to make sure that we don't cause toxicity with the consultants coming in? What can we do with our own colleagues so that they understand that they shouldn't be doing this throughout the project? I understand that as consultants, we're providing a service, but if you're asking us to provide the service and you know that there have been some indication, or from previous experience, that your coworkers don't want to work with consultants, or they are going to be speaking this way, then shouldn't the industry also have guidelines on how to interact with consultants in a more positive manner as well, so that we don't constantly have good consultants leaving the firm, thereby causing only not good performers to be consultants and come into your environment? It's kind of like one of those things where are we causing the conflict, or are you causing an industry to just be reduced to a bunch of toxic consultants and toxic clients? It has to be done both ways, in my own opinion. But we're gonna move on to the last story and see if anything changes with that, OP. I once had a client tell me he was going to get me fired at my consulting company. I had just told him that he negotiated a poor contract with a vendor and there was nothing I could do to support him. I walked out of the building, called my boss, and didn't go back to the client site for a week. Still employed by my consulting company and will retire in 3 years. Angry client is now head of his company and it's a well known shit show. Yeah, this one I'm on the fence about. On one hand, it's not really something you want to do. Tell a client that the contract is poor and then just have no solution or no way to support it. It's kind of, I can see why the client would get upset. Although, going to the extent of saying he's going to get me fired at my consulting company, I wonder if there's more facts than really giving in this story. But on the other hand, I'm not too sure that we need to be, as consultants, so sensitive to the clients that if we see somebody who's obviously negative, who's obviously not making good choices, should you really actually take their emotions and their words that seriously, especially if you're already a good consultant yourself? I'm not too sure. I just think these are just two hot-headed people, two frustrated people, just really deflecting their emotions onto each other, and they both just seem like they're just done with the work profession altogether.